Hey everybody, it's Brad with the Big Family Homestead, and today is just one of those days. I mean, it's been foggy to the point where if you walk outside, you're going to get wet if you're only being outside for even 10 minutes, but it's been that way for 3 days. And so I have a confession to make. Well, let's start the video. Okay. The confession is that the reality is that our lives are not extremely crazy, awesome, interesting every day like yesterday, running over and helping out the Don with his pigs, or crazy awesome stuff. Some days are kind of, frankly, boring. And then when you got boring days piled on to rainy days, piled on to there's not a lot of pressing projects on the meal plan for today, because I really don't feel like driving out into the woods and cutting a bunch of firewood in the rain and muck and wet. I'll wait till an okay sunny day. So what I figured I would do is I have a very embarrassing situation here, and the best way I think I can kind of just deal with that, to dismiss it, to get it out of my head so that I'm not so like focused on this is driving me nuts, is to share it with you, to share it with the world. And what is this embarrassing thing, you may ask? And that is, my studio is ridiculously messy. So I'm going to show you around the studio, guys. This is where I make media. This is where I record albums. This is where I have recorded other artists. All this equipment here, I've been compiling this equipment over the last 35 years. There's a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of interesting things. Even if you're not into tech, I bet you're going to find something to go, huh, that's neat. And so I figured I'd share that with you because, frankly, I'm not really motivated to go out in the woods and get all wet right now. So, here we go. Would you take a look, at this horrible mess? This is not even the half of it. That's the main work area that I'll go over there and show you. But, I mean, guys, whenever you switch stuff around, things get out of control, and here I'm going to show you something that should not be seen. Piles and piles of cabling, and every single one of those things has a purpose, and they all got to work in concert together, or else it just don't work at all. Oh yeah, here's something pretty important. I told you people, my studio is a mess. Whenever I get a new piece of gear or two, or figure out a different way that is a workflow that makes it easier for me, usually what happens is I have to tear the entire thing apart, pull all the cabling, fit everything in where I think it's going to work right, and then patch it all together, and that usually takes about 2 to 3 days, just because you got to really think it out, so that when you actually want to create something, it doesn't take a million years to patch this to that, to, I got to move this over here, got to move that over there. But anyway, just wanted to tell you that's why it looks like this, but let me tell you a little bit about some of the gear. All right, the centerpiece of the whole studio, everything that happens, whether it's audio, making music, making vocals, all that kind of stuff, or video production, is centered around that computer down there. I built that machine, and basically you get all the parts, you slap it together and put windows on there, and in theory, everything works. Now, these guys here, this is really interesting. This is not an actual mixer in that it doesn't have audio signal that goes into it. All this really is basically a really big glorified mouse. When I record music or audio, or video rather, it's very much easier for a person to take a fader and pull it up or down and do your edits on something that's tactile rather than click, 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 drag, drop. It's a pain in the booty to do it that way. So this is actually a pseudo mixer because no music goes through it. It's just a controller. Oh yeah, Google Home. Don't know what I feel about it just yet. It works, but just the whole creep factor. This thing is called a big knob, right there. And this is the volume knob for the entire studio. And it's really convenient because you might think, oh, geez, you know, click a mouse. No, it's just so much easier to grab a knob and turn it down or up. Here, my Germany mug. My mom got that for me a long time ago, and I usually drink coffee out of it every day. More stuff. Secondary monitor. This is actually going to be another monitor. I'm gonna split the signal from here to here, but also put one into this room over here that I'm going to use for a vocal booth for singing and speaking, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But this is one of the really neatest things. This is actually a new analog synthesizer, and we'll talk a little bit about analog in a second, but it's a 12 voice analog synthesizer, and you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. But we'll talk about the analog stuff later. Oh, there's a microphone there. Yeah, I need to take care of that. And this right here, what's underneath here, is actually a controller that works with software that's in the computer. So this thing can be pretty much anything you want it to be, whether it's African drums or acoustic guitars or sampled piano libraries. It's pretty crazy. This guitar here, Christa got that for me for our 25th wedding anniversary. And it's here instead of hanging over there because I really like it. I love it, in fact. This thing, for you guys who make videos, oh, how do I flip this back right? For you guys who make videos out there, this thing is really cool. It's a gimbal, a 3-point gimbal. And so when I put the phone in here, in this part, and turn it on, it keeps it so that the phone stays dead still. No matter you're flinging this thing around, it keeps the phone still so you don't have bumpy shots, even if you're driving somewhere. And I got this one. I don't know if they sell it anymore, but I liked it. It was a Skylab thing. I got it from Best Buy, but I think there's probably cheaper ones now. But this one was, I really liked that a lot. Let's go over here. Synthesizers. To me, I love synthesizers, but I love it when there's lots and lots of controls, because you've got, when you're making music, I don't want to be hindered. I want to grab a knob and I want to make it sound the way I want it to sound so I can continue on creating rather than futzing through screen after screen after screen on some of these kind of other ones. And like I said, you know, analog is definitely making a comeback. This is an analog synthesizer by Korg. There's another one. This one it's kind of cool. It's a little bit, you know, obnoxious, but yeah, it's part of it. Over here, the brains. This, where the green lettering is, this is where all the audio goes through. Anything that comes into the studio goes in here. This converts everything into zeros and ones and communicates, you guessed it, with the computer. And then you've got software over here that records it and does all that kind of stuff. But this is a Mark of the Unicorn device, and I've been using them for probably the last 20 years, back when you could only get 4 tracks. Now they're hundreds and hundreds. This is a killer microphone preamp. This is probably the nicest piece of studio equipment I own. It's just super high quality. It's by a company called Empirical Labs, and they combine a really high quality preamp with a compressor. But here we go. Let my shame foam up in my face. I'm coming in here. Bunch of books. All of this stuff in these things here, guys, these are all CDs or albums or songs that were recorded on digital audio tape. Back when digital audio tape was the way that you had to keep your master. Cheer Up Charlie, Scarecrow and Tin Man, Stuff for the House. And my goal is I'm going to put another monitor, like I was saying, over there. I'm going to put a monitor there, and one here. And I'll have a remote control in here that way, because there'll be, some screening, some soundproofing in here. I'll put soundproofing on the walls and soundproofing on the ceiling. And that way, I can record on my own. I don't have to have somebody sitting out here pressing start, stop, go, don't go. I can have a remote control in here and go about that. Guitar cases, obviously, and just lots and lots and lots of cabling. There's a CB. Why do I have a CB down there like that? No idea. But let's go on over here, because this is interesting too. Tube guitar amplifiers. I'm going to explain to you here tube guitar amplifiers in a second. But that is a tube guitar amplifier, but it's got a digital front end. But the tubes in it sound ridiculously good. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But some of the guitars, okay? Nice bass guitar. This guitar has a story. And you know what? I'll probably share that story probably on Patreon. But this used to be my dad's, now it's mine. This used to be my dad's, mine, then my dad's, then mine. And there's a special deal about it that it doesn't leave between him or me. That's a G&L. And here's a really cool, like an Epiphone Gibson knockoff, but sounds good, plays good. That guitar right there has been all over the world for 20 years. And that was given to me by Dino Elefante, his brother. John Elefante sings for the band Kansas. And that was a gift when we went into their recording studio in Nashville called the Sound Kitchen. And of course, Semper Fi guys. And then just stuff for the walls. I don't have enough stuff up because I like to try to create a space that is going to be conducive to being creative, even when you hit those rough spots. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about why analogs and tubes are still around. Now hold on just a second. You're trying to tell me that vacuum tube technology and analog synthesizers, which have been around for way, 50s and 40s and all that kind of stuff, that is the stuff that still sounds the best and still is what's coveted? Yeah, actually. The reality is that guitar amps, the really good ones, are still based with, 6L6, and tubes. There's all kinds of different vacuum tubes, but there is just something about the sound of an amplifier when it starts to, actually they call it break up, where it just starts to get a little hairy, starts to get a little bit unnerved, and there's harmonics that get in, put into the signal, the sound, even when it's just a little, just super clean, but then just a little bit of something, it adds this harmonic distortion that our ears find awesome. And the thing is that even though the modeling technology, all the digital stuff and all the whiz-bang computer things, they have tried really hard to sound very good, and they're just now starting to sound real, sound right, but that's the expensive stuff. And so the amount of, I guess you could call it musicality that is in vacuum tube guitar amps, that's still the way that most bands go, most artists. And in fact, the analog synthesizers that we were talking about, that's a funny thing too, because now it used to be that, back in the day you had analogs. It was like your Moog synthesizers. Those were the big deal. Like Rush, that's, Tom Sawyer, that's Moog, that's the Moog sound. And then, the 80s hit, and then everything switched over to what's called a Yamaha DX7, and everything became digital. Well, digital to the human ear, for whatever reason, doesn't sound as fat. It sounds thin. And once again, the modeling technologies are getting better to where a synthesizer that is modeled is getting really close to the way that it sounds analog. But the demand for those fat analog sounds has made retailers and producers start coming out with a bunch of new analog synthesizers, because what has happened was way back, 70s, people were buying a synthesizer for $1,000 or whatever. Well, then they went out of vogue and they started to get really, really, really hard to find. And now that they're kind of coming back in vogue and have been for a while, it's really hard to find them and they're really expensive. So you'll have these new companies going, hey, wait a minute, we can make analog, we can do this. Just for an example, there's a drum machine called a Roland TR-909, and you have heard the sound of the Roland TR-909. It's like that dance sound. It's like, And those drum machines are selling for about $4,000 if you can even find one. Another good example would be, the band Genesis. There's a song called Mama, or there's a song called, Mama. That whole beginning part. That was done on what's called a Roland CR78. If you can even find them, they're really expensive. So, analogs and tube technology are still here, and it's funny because the computers they're getting close, and I have a feeling that when they really nail it, this stuff's going to go back into the closet because the convenience of picking up one little box and going here instead of heavy amps and massive synthesizers and things that go out of tune, it's not going to be nearly as appealing. Now, one more thing. This device here, when we go out and do our live shows out on the lake or by the cemetery, this thing is basically a reflective sound killer. So you stick a microphone in here in the middle, and then it blocks the wind, it blocks all kinds of reflective sounds. So it makes it a lot easier for you guys to hear, because our camera will be mounted here pointing at us, and then it just makes the audio a lot better. Now, these things are silly expensive. I don't understand why, because it's just some cloth material and some other fibrous material around a thing. But when I bought these were $400. That's silly. All right, so for those of you who are techies, I'm sure that there was at least something that was interesting, but I hope that even the non-techies out there are going, I didn't know that about that. That's pretty interesting. Or at least it wasn't a waste of your time. So there it is. I'm Brad with the Big Family Homestead, and I'm hoping that we have a nice sunny day soon so I can do something more than this. Have an amazing day.